A full decade, 10 years, 120 months, and in every single one of them, somewhere across this country, out of a truck radio on a 2-lane somewhere in Texas, through a kitchen radio in Tennessee, out of a jukebox in a roadside bar on a Friday night.
Woman, let me be, and leave me alone.
One song sat at the top of the Billboard country chart. Just one. The most played, the most requested, the most wanted song in all of country music for that particular month. Let's go back to 1960. Number 10, 1960. The Nashville sound takes over. The year opens with Marty Robbins still ruling the chart. El Paso had climbed to number 1 in December 1959, and it wasn't letting go. And that song wasn't just popular, it was an event, a 6.5-minute Western movie compressed into a record.
Nighttime would find me in Rose's Cantina.
Country radio programmers said a song that long couldn't possibly be a single. Robbins knew different, but here's what defined 1960 more than anything else. Starting in February, Chet Atkins, the architect who was quietly reshaping country music from his production chair at RCA, produced back-to-back number ones that each stayed at the top for 14 weeks.
Out through the back door of roses I read.
14. Jim Reeves with He'll Have to Go, followed immediately by Hank Laughlin's Please Help Me, I'm Falling. These weren't honky-tonk songs. They were smooth, lush strings, the polished arrangements, something closer to a crooner than a cowboy, in both of them, produced by the same man. Atkins called it the Nashville sound, and the country chart in 1960 was his proving ground.
Out where the horses were taught.
Here's the thing about the Nashville sound. You might love it or resent it, but you can't argue with those numbers. 14 weeks doesn't happen by accident. Country radio was losing ground to rock and roll, and Atkins decided the way through was to broaden the appeal. Make it so your grandmother didn't change the station. Make it so the car salesman in Cincinnati could leave it on without feeling like he needed to explain himself. Then Cowboy Copas arrives in August with Alabama, 12 weeks at number 1.
I caught a good.
If you've ever wondered what it felt like to be taken over by a single song, to have radio just refuse to move on, that was 1960. 3 consecutive songs combined for 40 weeks at the top of the chart. 40 weeks. That's most of the year owned by 3 records. Furlin Husky closes December with Wings of a Dove. Quiet, spiritual, beautiful. The year ends gently, but the year that follows is going to be anything but gentle.
Many thoughts raced through my mind as I stood there.
Number 9, 1961.
North to Alaska, to go north, the rush is on.
Posthumous records and a song that wouldn't leave, January 1961. And the song sitting at number 1 is North to Alaska by Johnny Horton.
Gotta go north, the rush is on. Way up north.
You know the song, big brass, anthemic, feels like it was built for a movie soundtrack, because it was. What you might not know is that Johnny Horton was already dead by the time that song reached number 1. He was killed in a car accident on November 5th, 1960, just months after recording it. That's how the decade opens, a posthumous number 1, a man hearing his biggest chart success from somewhere he couldn't receive it, and it doesn't get easier from there.
George turned to Sam with his golden hit.
I Fall to Pieces by Patsy Cline hits number 1 in 1961. Her first number 1 ever. And you have to understand, Patsy Cline had been working, grinding, fighting with her label, fighting for airplay, and fighting to be taken seriously for years before that moment. 2 weeks at number 1. 2 weeks. And then it was gone.
North to Alaska, go north.
But here's the moment that actually defined 1961. When Leroy Van Dyke released Walk On By in September, it didn't leave. That song climbed to number 1 and ended up spending a total of 19 weeks at the top across its chart run, including 9 more weeks into 1962, setting a record for the most weeks at number 1 since Billboard combined sales and airplay into one chart. That record held for over 50 years until Florida Georgia Line finally broke it in 2013.
With the northern lights running wild in the land of the midnight.
You've probably heard Walk On By 100 times without knowing Leroy Van Dyke's name. That's a specific kind of legacy. Being the influence nobody credits is lonelier than obscurity. And if you've ever nodded along to that song without knowing who you were nodding along with, you're not alone. Most people haven't. November brings Jimmy Dean's Big Bad John, 2 weeks at number 1 on the country chart and number 1 on the all-genre Hot 100. The only song in 1961 to top both.
Way up north.
And if you grew up in a house where your parents whistled that song in the kitchen while making dinner, you know what I mean when I say some songs don't just get popular, they move in.
With the northern lights running wild in the land of the midnight.
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
Number 8, 1962.
I could be free evermore.
A carousel of one-time champions. Walk On By is still at the top in January 1962, just sitting there, finishing what it started. When it finally steps aside in March, the year becomes a carousel of artists who each get their moment and then step back into the crowd.
I could be free evermore.
Sheb Wooley, the same man who gave you The Purple People Eater on the pop charts in 1958, shows up in March with That's My Pa, his first ever country chart entry. 1 week at number 1. That was the entirety of Sheb Wooley's run at the top of the country chart. 1 week, strange career, strange moment, perfectly 1962. Billy Walker in April with Charlie Shoes, Claude King in June with Wolverton Mountain, Bill Anderson in October with Mama Sang a Song, and then Hank Snow in November, I've Been Everywhere.
Woman, let me be and leave me alone. I wanna
If you've ever tried to keep up with the place names in that song, you know it builds like a freight train. Written by Australian songwriter Jeff Mack, turned into a tour de force catalog of American geography by Snow's rapid-fire delivery. But December is the one that matters for where we're going. Husband and wife duo Carl Butler and Pearl, Don't Let Me Cross Over. It hits number 1 at the end of 62, and it's going to spend the beginning of 63 bouncing back and forth at the top of the chart with multiple return runs. A song about the temptation of crossing a line you know you shouldn't cross. Country music at its most essential, the desire to do something wrong alongside the full knowledge that it'll cost you. The year 1963 is 3 months away. Nobody knows yet what March is going to take from them.
I don't wanna be, and I don't wanna see.
Number 7, 1963.
I fell into a ring of fire.
The year the chart kept moving. January 1963, Marty Robbins' Ruby Ann for a single week. Then Carl Butler and Pearl reclaims the top and holds on through the cold months. And then March 5th, 1963, a small plane goes down in a Tennessee cornfield in a storm. On board, Cowboy Copas, Hawkshaw Hawkins, their manager Randy Hughes, and Patsy Cline, gone. All four, just like that.
You're like a child.
And here's what still gets me about this. Within weeks of that crash, Hawkshaw Hawkins' song Lonesome 77203 is climbing the country chart toward number one. A posthumous number one for a man who was buried before it hit the top. The record store had copies of his new record sitting in the bins the week he died.
Burns, burns, burn, the ring of fire.
Stay with me on this. Some of y'all just got a little quiet. I know. The country chart doesn't stop moving. It never stops moving. Johnny Cash puts Ring of Fire at number one that summer, one of the most iconic recordings ever made, with its mariachi brass section that everyone in Nashville told Cash didn't belong on a country record. He recorded it his way. It went to number one. Then Buck Owens arrives, Act Naturally his number one, and then Love's Gonna Live Here. And it doesn't move. Buck Owens holds the top spot for 16 consecutive weeks, rolling into 1964.
Burns, burns, burn, the ring of fire.
A new record for the longest unbroken run at number one on the Hot Country chart. And Owens didn't sound like what Nashville was telling him to sound like. He was doing Bakersfield, Telecaster guitar, hard driving rhythm, a working man's energy with no strings attached. He was essentially a correction, a course change, and the chart responded to it in the biggest possible way. The most popular songs of 1963 told you something. Grief and Grit, Loss and Defiance, and A Man from California Who Refused to Polish His Twang for Anyone. Number 6, 1964.
High from the highest tree, woman, would you weep for me?
Buck Owens, Jim Reeves, and a debut that made history. Buck Owens doesn't slow down in 1964. That 16-week run finally ends in February, and he comes right back anyway. My Heart Skips a Beat at number one. Together Again at number one. I Don't Care Just As Long As You Love Me at number one. 4 chart toppers in a single calendar year.
Spent the groceries and half the rent, like $14.27.
Buck Owens in 1964 was to country music what the Beatles were to pop, and the Beatles were happening at exactly the same time. The British invasion was consuming the pop charts, and country radio barely flinched. It had Buck Owens, and Buck Owens was answer enough. Johnny Cash hits the top with Understand Your Man in the Spring. You've got to understand how loaded that song is coming from Cash. Direct, slightly confrontational. A man telling someone to stop asking him questions and understand who he is. That's not performance. That's just Cash. July 31st, 1964. Jim Reeves, the man whose voice had defined the opening months of this decade's chart, dies in a plane crash near Nashville. He was flying his own plane through a thunderstorm. Within months, his posthumous recordings go to number one. I Guess I'm Crazy hits the top of the chart while Nashville is still in mourning for him. This is the second time in 4 years the decade has done this, taken an artist's death and placed their voice back on the radio before anyone had fully processed the loss. You can't argue with the songs. The grief was genuine.
Out of 7 sons, a pappy was a pistol, I'm a son of a gun. I said, dang me.
But there's something about a posthumous number one that feels like the only thing the industry knows how to offer when it can no longer give back what mattered most. Then November 28th, 1964. An unknown woman named Connie Smith walks up the Billboard country chart to number one with Once a Day. Her debut single, her very first release. The first time a female country artist had ever topped the country chart with her first single. And she'd stay there for 8 weeks. Number 5, 1965. Roger Miller beats the Beatles. Connie Smith holds number 1 into January, 8 weeks total for Once a Day. That's a record for a solo female artist that stands for nearly 50 years, until Taylor Swift finally breaks it in 2012. Think about what that means. 1964 to 2012, that's how dominant that debut single was.
You're the only world.
And there's something about that song that deserves a real moment. The title says she only misses him once a day. Sounds manageable, right? Then the chorus lands, once a day, all day long. That's not a clever twist. That's just the truth about grief delivered sideways, the way country music does it better than anyone else has ever figured out how to. But then Roger Miller walks in. King of the Road hits number 1 on March 27th, 1965.
The beating of my heart.
And if you've ever had that song come on and found yourself snapping your fingers before you even registered it was playing, you know what it does to a room. A song about owning nothing, going nowhere in particular, being broke on purpose, and somehow feeling like the freest person alive. It topped the country chart, topped the adult contemporary chart, reached number 4 on the Hot 100, hit number 1 in the United Kingdom, and at the Grammy Awards the following year, it won 5 Grammys on its own, including beating the Beatles Yesterday for Best Contemporary Single. I want you to sit with that.
Only world I know.
Roger Miller, King of the Road, beat Yesterday at the Grammys, and he did it from inside the country chart. Jim Reeves gets 2 more posthumous number 1s this year. This Is It and Is It Really Over? A dead man's voice on the radio almost a year after his death, making people pull over to listen. That's how powerful a voice Jim Reeves had. Some things don't stop just because you stop. Number 4, 1966.
It's been my home, and it'd be kind of hard for me to settle down.
9 weeks and a first CMA. The year opens with Buck Owens' instrumental Buckaroo, just 1 week at the top, but the fact that an instrumental country song could reach number 1 at all says everything about where Buck Owens stood by 1966. He had the chart so tuned to his Telecaster that even when he put out something without words, people went and bought it.
Blowing black coal, and she pulled around and back in front of.
Red Savine then puts Giddy Up Go at number 1 for 6 weeks, a song about a truck driver and the son he lost touch with, sentimental in a way that only country music was allowed to be in 1966 without anyone flinching. And if you grew up hearing that CB radio crackle through the story, you already know there's a specific kind of loneliness this song was built for. Buck Owens comes back with Waiting in Your Welfare Line. The chart moves through the summer, and then August arrives. David Houston, Almost Persuaded, 9 consecutive weeks at number 1. 9.
And some of them would kid me about my little sign. Of course,
there wouldn't be another unbroken run that long at the top of the country chart for over 40 years until Taylor Swift in 2012. Almost Persuaded is about standing at the absolute edge of an affair and making the decision barely to walk away. And Houston doesn't perform it like he's congratulating himself. He performs it like it nearly broke something in him to leave. That song should be more famous than it is. Honestly, that's probably the one take on this entire list. I know people are going to push back on in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong.
so from that day on, it's just been me.
December brings Jack Green to number 1 with There Goes My Everything. That song goes on to win Song of the Year at the very first CMA Awards ceremony held in October 1967. The first CMA Song of the Year in history, the first night country music gave itself an institutional award, and the song they gave it to belongs to Jack Green, who most people can't name.
A big lump came in my throat, and my eyes.
Number 3, 1967.
Come home, but drinking with lovers on your mind.
Loretta Lynn, finally gets her turn. Jack Green is still at the top when January 1967 opens. 5 more weeks, and then something happens that, if you know Loretta Lynn's story even a little, lands differently than a chart position can contain. February 11th, 1967. Loretta Lynn goes to number 1 for the first time with Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' with Lovin' on Your Mind, her first number 1. And Loretta Lynn had been recording since 1960. 7 years. 7 years of building, touring, showing up, fighting for airtime on a chart that consistently treated women as secondary acts. Before her first number 1. And Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' wasn't a polished Nashville sound ballad with strings and background singers telling women to be patient. It was direct, confrontational, a woman telling her husband exactly what she thought of him coming home drunk and expecting something from her. In 1967, country radio did not typically give women space to say things like that. Loretta Lynn said it anyway. On your mind, just stay out there on the town. If you've ever watched someone finally say the thing they'd been sitting on for a long time, that's the feeling of that song reaching the top of the chart. 23 different singles topped the country chart in 1967. 23. The chart is moving fast now. Sonny James is beginning what will eventually become a record-setting streak of 16 consecutive number 1s between 1967 and 1971. Jim Reeves gets one more posthumous number 1. I Won't Come In While He's There. 3 years after his death, the voice still won't stop. The chart in 1967 is crowded, restless, ear and full of voices still figuring out how much space they're allowed to take up. The answer is about to become all of it. Number 2, 1968. And I heard it. The year the chart became a different animal, January 1968, Bill Anderson and Jan Howard are finishing their time at number 1 with For Loving You, a duet, a love song, gentle. And then Merle Haggard walks in. Sing Me Back Home hits number 1 in late January, a song about a death row inmate asking to hear one more piece of music before his execution. And Haggard knew that territory. He'd done time at San Quentin State Prison. He wasn't performing this from the outside. He was reporting it from somewhere he'd actually been.
Old gospel songs.
February and March belonged to Henson Cargill's Skip a Rope, 5 weeks at number 1. A song that's basically an indictment of the adults raising the children they claim to love, delivered with a softness that made it land harder than anything angry could. Hard to believe that hit number 1 on country radio in 1968, but it did. Haggard comes back. The Legend of Bonnie and Clyde? Then Mama Tried. By August, he's logged 8 weeks at the top for the year, and nobody in 1968 is more dominant on this chart. I recall. Then Tammy Wynette, Divorce, reaches number 1 on June 29th, her 3rd consecutive solo chart topper, a song about a mother spelling out the word divorce in front of her 4-year-old because she doesn't have the heart to say it out loud. Written by Bobby Braddock and Curly Putman, delivered by Tammy Wynette in a way that takes whatever armor you walked in with and quietly removes it. September brings Jeannie C. Riley in Harper Valley, PTA. 4 weeks at the top of the country chart, also number 1 on the Hot 100. In a crossover that hit both charts simultaneously, the only song in 1968 to do it. Tom T. Hall wrote it, Jeannie C. Riley performed it once, and it became her entire public identity for the rest of her career. That's a strange kind of prison to live in, being the answer to a song that was a question about someone else's hypocrisy.
before you move along.
November. Stand by Your Man. 3 weeks at number one. The most covered, most argued about, most culturally loaded song on this entire list. Written by Tammy Wynette and her producer Billy Sherrill, it crossed over to number 19 on the Hot 100. Some people hear it as a woman diminishing herself. Wynette said all she was trying to say was, be understanding, be supportive. I'm not going to tell you who's right, but I think if you're nodding right now, you already know which side you've always been on. Conway Twitty closes the year with his first ever number one, Next in Line. 40 more would follow before he was done. 24 different singles topped the country chart in 1968. The chart had never moved this fast, and it wasn't slowing down. Number one, 1969.
Mama sang to me.
Johnny Cash, Charley Pride, and the End of Something. January 4th, 1969. Daddy Sang Bass by Johnny Cash replaces Glenn Campbell's Wichita lineman at the top of the country chart. Cash holds it for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of that family gospel energy he could do like nobody else. The deep voice anchoring the story of a family that kept something holy alive through whatever was crashing down around them.
So we were trying to make a living out of black land. We'd get together.
On February 24th, Cash records live at San Quentin State Prison. The resulting session produces A Boy Named Sue, written by Shel Silverstein and recorded live in front of a room full of inmates who understood every single word of it. You can hear them on the recording. You can hear the room. Cash knew exactly what he was doing, making a record that proved country music could be alive, present, in a real place, with real stakes, for real people with nowhere else to be. A Boy Named Sue reaches number one that summer, 5 weeks at the top of the country chart, number two on the Hot 100, his biggest crossover of the decade, and he did it in a prison yard.
Family circles singing loud. Daddy sang bass.
The Johnny Cash Show premieres on ABC on June 7th. Hee Haw debuts on CBS on June 15th. For the first time, country music is a network television event, not a specialty program, not a regional broadcast, a primetime network event that America shows up for. And then August. Charley Pride hits number one with All I Have to Offer You Is Me, his first career number one.
Mama sang to me.
And if you know Charley Pride's story, a black man from Sledge, Mississippi, who signed with RCA in 1966, whose early records were initially released without his publicity photo because the label worried radio programmers wouldn't play him if they knew. You know that this August 1969 chart position is not just a number. It's a correction. It's a recognition that took way too long to arrive. Prior to Pride reaching number one in 1969, it had been 25 years since a black artist had topped the Billboard country chart, a quarter century. And when Pride finally got there, he held on. I'm So Afraid of Losing You Again closes out 1969 at number one, the very last chart topper of the decade. The decade ends with Charley Pride's voice at the top, and Merle Haggard winning CMA Single of the Year for Okie from Muskogee, a song about a different kind of America, written in 10 minutes on a tour bus.
Won't be broke